All right, so we're going to just start with a little moment to pause, as we often do, to just check in. And kind of how I've themed the class today, it's around kind of using our body as this tool for guidance, and you'll understand it. I mean, we always kind of tuning in, but specifically taking that focus that how when we need to, let's say we need to make a decision, we're so used to going into the rational mind and making that decision from there. What if we slowly use our practice to tune into this kind of another way of tuning and aligning and finding guidance? And we can do it in such safe way in our practice. Just kind of taking a shape and noticing like how does that shape land, and beginning to make these small decisions like on the mat based on the guidance coming more from the body rather than from the brain or the rational mind. And then slowly as we play with this and become like more tuned to this way of listening, this inner listening, then we can bring that to like big life decisions. And then it gets interesting and exciting. So let's try it now. So just kind of finding a seat. You don't have to make it fancy or special, somewhere where you feel comfortable. And you can sit quietly for a moment, and the eyes can be open, the eyes can be closed. Just find out what helps you connect better. Just nothing fancy, just a moment in pause. Taking a couple of breaths here, just noticing where you feel the breath. Is there anything that is very noticeably in the foreground for you? Could be a physical sensation, could be a narrative that's running, a feeling tone. Simply noticing. Let's spend another few moments here, where there's not much of an agenda to get anywhere or even to find something out. Simply pause to tune in. And then I'll give you some choices for the beginning practice, but one of the really good things with this way of teaching and receiving the teaching is you really, even throughout the practice, you could do your own thing. Like it's really an invitation for you to take more responsibility, right? So how I often, this one posture, how I often like to play with this, like tuning in, and you could make this decision a few ways. So if I give you two options to take a butterfly, either folding forward, and the forward folding could be a representation where you maybe need a little bit more quiet tuning in and not to be so available and open. And then the other option would be to take the same posture reclined on your back. If you have a bolster or cushion or pillows, I saw some of you had them ready, then you could create a little bit of elevation behind your back, so it creates more openness in the chest. So spend a moment. If you're not clear, I would advise that just kind of play with this a little bit. Stay seated for a bit longer and see if you can get an indication from your body, like which way are you inclined. So as we do the reclined butterfly, it's more open. So I feel it's also more vulnerable. You're a little bit more exposed and it's more expansive. And then the coming in, as I said, that is a little bit more gathering, a little bit more like I need to kind of go really kind of in and into myself, and maybe more introverted. And it could be that one of those postures very specifically like calls out for you or is your favorite. And so notice how you make that decision. And then one way to decide here is like, what would bring me more into balance? We could ask it also that way. So it's not as if there's a right or way, or you could get this wrong and do this in a wrong way. There's no possibility of that. Just simply kind of starting in a small way to practice that your guidance comes from the body. And then you follow that and you notice, how does this shape land right now? And then as you spend some minutes here, just take notice. The physical sensations that are present. The breath as it moves. So one of the ways that we can begin to fine-tune this inner listening is that we kind of keep at it. We keep noticing the subtle changes that are there. Much like every class, I'm guiding you towards the felt sense in each posture. So let yourself fully land. And land, in this framework of inner listening, in this framework of being guided by your body. And however that then begins to show up in your experience. So yin already, the practice in and of itself, as it really invites us to slow down, it already has built into it this inner listening, to tuning in. So slowing down essential. Finding more focus that begins to land. Often it's this landing downwards and inwards. So literally away from a very like kind of brain, mind, rational, mind-centered way of being to moving downwards. The attention literally is dropping. And see where the attention kind of naturally will gravitate towards. Is there one specific sensation that you can feel in the posture that the focus lands on, or is it more open and general? How is that today? So I'm not even guiding you into that so specifically, like for yourself. And this type of inner listening eventually starts to give us access to inner knowing. There's a guidance that arises, in my experience, it's not in a form of like words or like a voice, but it's more of a felt sense. It's more sensory for me, that guidance. We'll spend here about another minute. Know that you can again always follow that inner guidance if you need to release earlier at any stage. And if you are on your back, you could simply straighten your legs and stay lying on the back. And if you were in a forward folded shape, slowly help yourself curl up and out and then join us on your back. So let's take a little moment where you just come and feel the resonance from the posture, and we keep tuning in. And again, there's no agenda in that listening. We're not looking for anything specific. Just moment to moment. What's here now? And then slowly let your feet come onto the mat and begin to roll over to one side, especially if you're on top of a bolster, rolling over to one side and then curling up to your seat. And then bringing the focus, like physically, a little bit more towards the hips. So I place my feet in front, and there's a few options here, as always. So I'm going to aim for my left leg to go under and right knee come on top could be one option. So my right knee is on top. I'm doing a mirror image for you, and this we call the shoelace pose. And you could be sitting yourself a little bit higher. So that could be my first go-to. If you find it really hard for the hips, then taking a pillow or something that you can sit yourself up on. And this is one option, how you could take this posture. We're going to take a lateral stretch from here with the left hand coming down. If this is not working, you could also simply take your left leg out and do this posture from here. So I usually don't use this as an alternative to this, but it just takes the knees nicely out of the equation. So if the problem is in the knees, obviously, of course, you could also take this from cross-legged. So I'm going to pause with the right knee on top. And then, as I said, just give it a moment here to really land. See what type of bolstering you need. Feel into the hips. Take maybe a breath in, and really as you exhale, feel that exhale moving down into the pelvis, letting the bones get heavier. One more here like this. And then beginning to take your left hand out, walking it out towards the left. If you have blocks and you want to have a hand on a block or down the track, if you come deeper, it could be the forearm on the block, then you can play with that. And taking your right hand, and again, it could either come up and above and kind of rest on top of your head, or it could wrap behind your back. So we're taking a lateral stretch. And then begin simply by starting from a really kind of mild edge. You feel a tugging or pulling sensation along the sideline. And give it some time. Relax your jaw. And then notice how this posture lands, like what arises in this shape. Again, with that idea of like I'm listening to the sensations. And then slowly seeing if there is a possibility of starting to discern, like from, notice how there can be, even in this inner listening, there can be quite a lot of static that's there. So the kind of the deeper, quieter voice, if we want to say that, the voice with guidance, often eludes us. And so let yourself really quiet. Let the body become a little bit more still, and so that you can notice when there's a guidance that something needs to change about your posture. about your breath. Really open to be guided from within. Which includes that if you need to do something different than what I'm offering, you'll do that. Give it another moment. And then we'll slowly find our way back up and take a little moment of pause. So whichever posture you're in, you're at the top so that you can really feel that right side. And your forward fold from here could keep both legs wrapped. So when we come forward from here, where we have the legs stay in the same position, you're still targeting mainly the hips and the outer hips. Or option could be to straighten the bottom leg, the left leg, and fold over, we call it half shoelace, and now your target area has changed. Now it's more the back of that left leg rather than the hips. There might be something in the hips as well. And if you were in this variation, then you could come forward here or over that left leg. So once more, these are not majorly important life decisions that you're making, but I'm giving you these variations not to confuse you, but really to give you this moment and listen in, tune in, and what works for you today. How does this shape land? Sometimes it's really clear, other times it's not, and guess what? This is how it's going to be in life as well. Begin to apply your kind of yin mindset, not pushing, not forcing. Really tune into that inner space. As always, when the mind is restless, let yourself tune in a more focused, one-pointed focused way where you isolate the breath and you feel the sensations of the breath, helping to settle the mind. And when there's more calm, more capacity for presence, then we can open that focus wider, including everything that's arising in this moment. Sometimes this inner knowing is really subtle and fleeting. And sometimes it's quite persistent. And as I said, possibly it's more a sensation than a thought. Often the areas in the body associated with this type of a knowing is either heart or your gut. We'll give it another minute here. And then take your time. We're beginning to release. So we want this release to be slow and mindful. Landing with the spine upright, maybe a little pause here for a moment to just feel the back line of the body. To unravel, so whichever posture you were in, taking yourself now onto your back. So a moment in rebound as we let ourselves really receive this last shape that you've taken. So the rebound can always be with the legs straight on the mat, or you could keep the feet on the mat, possibly feet a bit wider and knees resting against each other. We call it constructive rest. So whichever suits your body best. Take a moment to really let yourself drop onto the ground and not trying to hold yourself in any way. Let your body melt. Or maybe it's a feeling of heaviness. Or spaciousness. So however it lands in your experience. And then we stay on the back for a twist. So you're going to step the soles of the feet onto the mat. And so we had the right knee on top in shoelace. So here as well, we're going to take the right leg and wrap it around the left leg. So as if you're sitting cross-legged, you're going to take the right thigh and cross it over the left thigh. And so we take this into a twist. The hips going to hop a little bit over to the right. And then you're going to take the knees and begin to rotate them over to the left. Right hand is stretching out to the right, and the hand can find its place straight out from the shoulder, a little bit higher up. See if you need any props here. The thighs can be supported on top of a block or a cushion. So find stability. Find again the right amount of sensation. See if the body can guide you there. Can you notice when the discomfort is really such that it's better that you take care of that. It's better that you support yourself. Can you discern that? In little ways, how is the body guiding you in your practice? And then as you settle into the shape, keep listening. Some of the obstacles that can arise, why we often just feel like there's no guidance coming, especially when it comes to bigger decisions. It's not so clear, at least in my experience, is when we have a very strong attachment to the outcome. So again, that's why I find yin such a perfect way to kind of practice and tune in, as we often emphasize here that there's no final, like there's no perfect way to be in a posture. So there's no outcome per se. It's you kind of tuning in, feeling in, trying different ways and beginning to notice when the posture works, accesses the target areas in a way that is not aggressive, in a way that you can still soften, relax, have access to soft breath, soft belly. Let's give it another 5 breaths. See what can relax more, what can yield into gravity more. And then let us slowly come back to the center, arm back, legs back, unravel. Spend a moment here as well to just pause. Maybe the feet can stay on the mat and knees can rest against each other. Feel the back line of the body. Release your shoulders, so the shoulder blades heavy, so you feel the top of the chest is widening, the collarbones are widening. Can you sense your face and see if the tiny muscles around your eyes can relax a little bit more? Maybe you feel your, as your jaw relaxes, let the teeth part just a little bit. So there's no clenching of the teeth and the jaw. And just this overall, getting this overall sense of right here, right now, this body, this breath. And then we'll slowly begin to transition back to seated. So it could be that the knees come in and you want a little bit of movement on the back first, hugging the knees to your chest, squeezing them in, or maybe rocking a little bit from side to side or circles with the knees. And then you could also again roll over to one side, or you could get a little bit of momentum by holding the backs of the legs and taking a little rock to come back up to your seat. And so now we have the 3 postures on the opposite side. So left knee on top if you're coming for the shoelace pose. So that is where we're targeting the hips, the outer thighs. And if you have any knee issues, then maybe today, or you just prefer taking your lateral stretch here, having the right leg out and the left knee bent to the side. Once you've settled in, take a moment, so whatever you've chosen, get stable in it so it feels steady for you. Take a breath in, so you really kind of land here. Let your exhale feel the bones moving downwards, downwards, downwards. Recognize how you made the choice. Often we do it also just out of habit. And so I'm trying to break that also a little bit. And then taking the lateral stretch as a first step in the posture. So bringing yourself over right hand, either palm down or using a block for your forearm. Take it gradually. And then find a place, left arm could come and just rest on your head. Or another variation is that it wraps behind your back. Can you tune in and check in and listen what your shoulder tells you, like which variation works? And we want to feel that sensation along the side line of the body, but we want that top shoulder to be able to soften and relax still. And then see if the teeth can stay slightly parted and the face relaxed. Give it another 2 breaths for the side line of the body. And then as we slowly release the top hand and you come back to center, give it a pause here to feel the left side. And then it's your forward fold. It could be that the legs stay as they are. Then you keep emphasizing the outer thighs. If you want to include more of the back line of the body and the back of the right leg, you can straighten the bottom leg and come into what we call half a shoelace. And if you had that right leg out to the side, any variation of coming forward from there. Sometimes with the inner knowing is that we don't want to know what we know. Sometimes truth can be quite inconvenient. And so it's like a two-edged sword, that following that inner knowing can often take us out of our comfort zones. But then it also opens us up to life as it is, like to more authenticity, more connection, I would say more freedom. Again, another 5 breaths or so. What can soften? What can yield? Or maybe you need to back off. Notice how you decide to stay, to lean in, or to back out. What is it that you follow? And then we are slowly walking back up, taking a little moment here to again just recognize the effect of the pose. And as we lie onto our backs, if you have blocks, then just have them handy there. The next posture will have a choice. Or if you have a pillow or something, just have it handy on the side so you don't have to get up. And if you don't have anything, don't worry. That I'll give alternatives. We first just lie onto the back. Marinate a little bit here in the afterglow and the rebound. Often getting in touch with that inner knowing is more like an unlearning, a process of unlearning that we need to that we undertake. As we are this is not something that we are often taught or modeled. Like a new language that we're tuning into. And that does include that twist as well. So when the feet come onto the mat, you had your left knee on top in the shoelace. So then here as well, we're going to cross that left thigh over the right and taking the twist now with the hips hopping a little bit over to the left and then taking the thighs over to the right. Your left hand can stretch out. Again, support yourself in any way that the body is guiding you. Play with that a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with having like a favorite way to do a posture. But sometimes it is interesting to kind of begin to notice when we simply move into something out of habit and we've lost a tiny bit of that curiosity of like, what if I move my hand this way or that way? Like, how does that actually feel? Do I turn my head towards the knees or away from the knees or somewhere in between? As I said, one of the things that clouds that inner knowing is when we have strong attachment to the outcome. And another one is our kind of this fear or desire based drives that is also often mistaken for kind of intuition. So notice how this tool kind of really needs to be calibrated and tuned into. It needs this type of open-mindedness. Often if you have like very, very strong beliefs or ideologies, then that also obstructs this knowing that is very much moment-based. It's arising in presence. And that's why mind is also kind of can be an obstacle, because mind wants to control and plan. And beginning to live through this inner guidance, it often needs us to really get comfortable with the unknown and to lean into that. It needs this trust that in that moment, a direction or a choice will be revealed to us. So here, practice trusting the ground and leaning into the ground, not trying to hold yourself quite so much. And then lean into an openness in your own being. Even letting the boundaries of the body just kind of widen, even though I'm talking about leaning in and listening to the body. But also let yourself begin to feel the body more than just this solid entity. Feel into the subtleties of the currents and the rivers that move through the body, the pulsation. Give it another breath here. And then we'll slowly roll onto our backs again to release the twist, taking the feet onto the mat. Maybe keep them on the mat for now for a moment, if it's okay. Let the knees rest against each other. Let the hands find a place. Maybe there's a bit of imbalance that we feel in the posture, or when we come out of the posture, feel in the body that imbalance. Let that be. Feel the right side, left side. And before going over to the next posture, just hug your knees in for a moment and just squeeze them in. Let your lower back lengthen down towards the mat. If it's uncomfortable for the thighs to be together, just separate them a little bit so there's no discomfort in that groin area. Just a few breaths. And then keeping your thighs hugged in, we'll just take a little bit more of an active twist here, and I'm aiming to just stimulate a little bit the navel center area. So take your arms out to the sides, and you can keep it really small, or you can keep it a little bit more dynamic. It's up to you. I'm going to squeeze the thighs together, hands go out as if you're going into a twist. You take a breath in at the center, and then exhale, let the knees begin to drop over to the right, but you don't take them onto the ground. So you just kind of hover, and your navel is activated and the left shoulder is on the ground. And inhale, come back to the center. And then exhale, let the knees lean over to the left. Maybe the head turns over to the right. Only so much that definitely the right shoulder is on the mat. And then come back to the center. And move like this a few times to side. So you could make this really small. Or you could give your abdominals a little bit of a challenge here. Those who feel like super strong could straighten the legs as the legs go over to the right. They straighten. I don't feel particularly strong tonight, so I'm just going to keep my knees bent. And just a little bit more activation coming in. And then while you move from side to side, just one more time to either side. For the next shape, we're going to take a back bending shape. So let your feet come onto the mat, and if you have a block handy or something that you can put under your hips, you could come to that bridge pose or puntoon, or you could flip over onto your belly and come to a Sphinx pose. So 2 different back bends. Tune in. If you don't know either of them, I'm going to show both of them. So I'm placing the block, cushion, folded blanket under the buttocks and straightening the legs. Arms go up above. So this possibly is the milder one of the 2. And the second option is a Sphinx pose, where you roll onto your belly and you bring your elbows onto the ground. And you have your forearms or elbows slightly forward from the shoulders. And you find the distance for your legs that feels comfortable. So a little bit more stimulation possibly in this one, in the lower back area. So again, notice how you make that decision. There's no right or wrong, just I'm inviting some curiosity into that part of the process. And you know that in Sphinx, then you have also different variations. You could bend into the knees at one point. You could straighten the arms at one point. So we'll spend about 4 minutes here in a back bend of your choice. Letting yourself settle. And then sensing, tuning, listening. How does this shape land? What does it invoke? What does it reveal? And once more, we're not really looking for anything, we're not fixing anything. It's kind of like, think of it like an exercising your awareness, exercising awareness exercise. Again, about a minute left. Notice if anything needs to change. if you are on your back with a block under your sacrum, then take your time. Step your feet onto the mat, 1 foot at a time. Bring the arms back. Lift the hips and release the block. And if you're in the Sphinx shape, then you can slowly bring yourself onto your belly. So those who are on the back will stay on the back. Those who are on the belly can stay on the belly for a moment again, just to give yourself again this chance to pause and feel. And if you are on your back, you could squeeze again the knees in and spend a little moment rocking there on the back or hugging the knees in. And if you are on the belly, you could switch to either all fours and some movement there, or to child's pose. And if you are on your back, eventually you're going to transition up to seat and then all fours as well. And we'll continue with a wide knee child's pose. And guess what? A few options here as well. So big toes together, the knees can find their width. And if you again have a bolster and you are wanting to make it a little bit more restorative, feel free to take a child's pose with belly on a bolster. At one point, so we aiming to the wide knee child's pose aims physically in this area, inner thighs, the adductor muscles, the groin muscles here. So if you're in wide knee child's pose and you're not really feeling much stimulation here, just know that the variation frog is a way to access that area as well. Your feet could stay together at the back. I'll show you in this angle. Your feet could move apart. It just feels different, and there's different things happening in your hips. So for some people, this feels better, for others this, and some bodies can handle both. And where your hips are is going to also be like, where do you feel a stretch along the inner thighs? We don't want to feel too much like pressure here in the outer hip. So it's really meant to work the inner thighs. So there's a few options now again. And work into it gradually. And could be that the wide knee child's pose has plenty sensation, and that's where you'll stay for the whole time, or even including your bolster. And could be that your hip structure is such that you could right away come into frog and relax there for the duration of the posture. So again, can your body tell you? Forget about like the shape or the look of the shape, and just tune in. And take this again as a practice of really honing in this idea of inner listening that will then eventually lead towards or access the inner knowing. Here on the mat in a really kind of safe and small ways. And then with this idea that eventually off the mat. Some of my biggest life-changing decisions have been following this really, it's non-conceptual sense that makes absolutely no sense to the rational mind. The rational mind kind of goes along kicking and screaming. In my case, those two cases that I'm thinking of that have been really pivotal and literally changed the course of my life, this inner knowing was really persistent. It really at the time made no sense at all. But having gone through that a couple of times, there's like this immense trust. But that trust is really in hindsight. In that moment, it didn't really make sense if I would have just kind of stayed on that rational level. And I'm very grateful that I followed. And then give it another breath. And especially if you're in that frog shape, it might be a little bit awkward to come out. Careful is what I mean, just coming out carefully. Helping yourself again, the thighs together, and see if you want some movement, like hips maybe rotating, or if you want to just settle back towards a child's pose with thighs closer together as just a moment of recovery. Could also be all fours and some cat and cow. So we'll just have a 3-4 breaths. And then roll yourself up to sit on your heels, and last posture. And I want you to again just tune in, like how would your body guide you to finish your practice? Don't worry, I'll give you some options, but I also really want you to kind of notice this decision-making process. See if it really leads you somewhere. See if nothing arises, that all of that is okay. How would you finish your practice? So we'll have about like 5-6 minutes. And good endings could be, so I'm just giving you choices, but you're totally free to do whatever. You could take a longer Shavasana. You could take a meditation. You could come down and do another twist. There could be another forward fold, maybe your legs straight forward, or another butterfly. You could use your wall, and you could take your legs up against the wall. So how would you finish your practice? Notice if today having choice is something that you really appreciate, or is it something that gets you a bit stuck? All of that is part of the inquiry. There's no right or wrong. However, whatever reactions arise, you can learn from that. And if you are taking an asymmetrical posture, don't worry, I'll keep the time. So when we are halfway through, I will give a little reminder that we're halfway through. So if you need to change the side. And know that our next shape is Shavasana. So also if you are in a posture and you want to release it earlier than that 5-6 minute mark, then you could also do that. So really beginning to discover and kind of this inner knowing, inner resonance, the possibility that all that's needed for that is simply kind of this openness that there's a possibility that we can know things in other ways than simply through the rational mind. Just openness to that. And then beginning to tune into the body, just like we've been doing today, beginning to listen. Often that means that the attention needs to kind of drop down and in. And then notice how, as the awareness here in this shape, as it travels through the inner body, the awareness, your presence, is kind of like sunshine and water for the plants. It brings things alive. One of the important points to recognize is when living a life according to this inner guidance or inner knowing, that does not mean that automatically the life becomes like easy and, I don't know, successful. It does not like ward off illness or accidents or death. But what it does allow is for us to really relate to those things that happen, the external, internal circumstances, to relate to those with more space, more grace, and more creativity. And this also does not put us in charge or in control of life. It's quite the opposite. It actually invites this sense of surrender, that there's a greater wisdom. And that greater wisdom, I find, brings deeper intimacy with life, and that greater wisdom is more concerned kind of the wholeness of life, or the interconnectedness. So it's living a life from that more tuned place is more in service of a greater whole. If you're doing a one-sided posture, let yourself change. And know that you can release at any point. Beginning to follow that inner knowing can really simplify life. There's greater availability to what's actually here. If If you are in symmetrical posture, meaning that you didn't have two sides, then you could slowly start to release. But again, if you feel like you want to stay longer, feel free. If you are doing like a twist or one-sided, stay for another minute. I was a little bit late in giving you the cue to change. And then everyone can begin to get themselves ready for about 5-6 minutes in Shavasana. And as always, you could silence your device or even leave the meeting if you want to have a longer Shavasana, work more on your own time frame. If you're staying with me, let yourself get comfortable and warm. Maybe something to cover your eyes. And then we continue dropping, we continue softening. Let yourself feel the physical body that we've been tuning in. Letting that be the gateway to maybe beginning to sense something more subtle, or even imagining the body beginning to dissolve. A sense of spaciousness and openness. So our practice with this attunement and inquiry can often begin to soften this boundary between the inner and the outer, the self and the other. And there's a potential that this can lead to this experience of natural openness. A spaciousness. Again, tune in to you. Just stay as you are for a bit longer. Try to ignore and let the voices recede to the background, or do you bring in some movement, maybe small fingers, toes, or maybe the body wants to have a bigger stretch. Take your time with this. Feel that there's no rush. You could eventually roll to one side if you want to finish together. You can roll to a fetal position, and then from there curling yourself up to your seat for just a moment. Pausing. And again, just simply this openness to the possibility that as we tune into the body can give us signals whether we are in our truth or not. And knowing that this is a lifelong process, this tuning into this inner knowing, there's like no final destination where we've mastered this. But it could set an orientation or direction that might be different from how we are used to operating from. And then as we finish, I'm inviting one in, and you can do, of course, again, what works for you. So if you want to sing with me, place your hands in however you want, however connects you to this little closing of a session. And then if you are singing, empty your breath out, draw an inhale in, and then singing. You could stay seated, you could have a little bow forward, you could bow more deeply forward again, a ritual of your choice. So mine is to bow in gratitude and to bow as a reminder for me to be humble. And that humbleness really has to do with that same idea that I was saying, that this inner knowing is this release of control and more kind of a surrender to a greater wisdom that can guide. And thank you so much for joining today.